Hey there guys, this is Cole. Welcome back to another movie review. Today, we are continuing on the Jurassic Park series of movie reviews, and today I'm going to be reviewing the 1997 sequel, The Lost World Jurassic Park, directed by Steven Spielberg, which I have in like this 5-movie collection here of the first 5 Jurassic Park movies, which just comes with the first 3 Jurassic Park movies and the 2 Jurassic World movies. I will be reviewing the rest of these, but right now I'm reviewing the second movie, The Lost World, and after this, you know what? Screw it. Since the first Jaws movie is turning 50 years old since Jaws celebrated its 50th anniversary this year and it's coming to movie theaters this Friday, I figured soon I might as well review the first Jaws movie, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And then after my Jaws review, I'll get back to the Jurassic Park reviews, but for now, we're reviewing the second movie, The Lost World Jurassic Park, which I know this is a movie that's pretty divisive. Some people either really like this sequel or some people don't, but I think this is a good sequel for reasons I'm going to cover in the review, but yeah. And I will say, this movie does have a really good cast. You got Jeff Goldblum as Ian Malcolm, Julianne Moore as Dr. Sarah Harding, Richard Schiff as Eddie Carr, Vince Vaughn as Nick Van Owen, Arliss Howard, played by Peter Ludlow, and you got Peter Stormare, and you got Dieter Stark, who is played by Peter Stormare, and you got Richard Attenborough as John Hammond, returning from the first movie in this sequel. So yeah, the movie's got a really good cast overall. So, what is the plot to The Lost World Jurassic Park? The plot of this movie is as follows. Sequel in which entrepreneur who genetically engineered the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park transpires to have closed more of the prehistoric monsters on another island location. Researchers arrive to observe the creatures in their natural habitat, but not on their heels, is a band of mercenaries intent on capturing the dinosaurs and transporting them back to San Diego. So that's basically the plot synopsis to this movie. But how was this movie overall made? Well, when the first Jurassic Park movie was released on June 13th, 1993, the movie received overwhelmingly positive reviews from critics and audiences and was a huge hit at the box office, making $930 million worldwide at the end of its theatrical run in 1993. So, because of the positive reception of Jurassic Park, a sequel to the book by Michael Crichton was made so Universal could make a sequel to the first Jurassic Park movie. Because for those of you who don't know, the first Jurassic Park movie is based on a book from 1990 written by Michael Crichton, which I have read the book. It is a really good book, and the movie is great too, but despite the fact that there are changes to the movie, I still do really enjoy the original movie from the 90s as well as the book by Michael Crichton. I've not yet read the second book that this movie's based on, The Lost World Jurassic Park. I have a copy of the book, I just haven't had the time to get to it yet, but anyway, so yeah, like I said, the first Jurassic Park movie was a movie that it was a big hit at the box office, and the movie did receive positive reviews from critics and audiences. So because of the big success of it and the good reception it got, they hired Michael Crichton to write a sequel to the book. That way they could make a sequel to the movie. So how was this movie received? Unlike the first Jurassic Park movie, which did receive positive reviews from critics and audiences, and is highly regarded as one of the best movies of all time, the sequel, The Lost World Jurassic Park, which was released worldwide on May 19th of 1997, received mixed reviews from critics and audiences, but it was still successful at the box office, making $618 million worldwide off a $73 million budget. Now, as for my reaction to the movie, The Lost World Jurassic Park, while not as good as its predecessor, is still a very good movie that does not deserve the hate it gets. Now, I know that Steven Spielberg, who directed the first movie, who directed this movie, was very proud of the first movie he directed, like everyone else was. However, he hated this sequel, and Steven Spielberg admitted in interviews he did not want to direct a second Jurassic Park movie because he felt like the first movie was perfect as a standalone movie, which, I mean, yeah, technically this movie, the first Jurassic Park movie never really needed a sequel, but I still really enjoyed this second movie. But without further ado, enough of the long intro, let's get into my review of this movie. So, the movie starts off on Isla Sorna, 87 miles southwest of Isla Nublar, on an island, and even though it's off-screen, the opening scene where the Compy dinosaurs attack a little girl is rather effective at the beginning of the movie. You know, for a movie that's PG-13, and again, you know, they don't show it on screen, but like, you know, like, it's very effective with the way it's done. I mean, the opening scene to this movie, I'm pretty sure that's one of the scenes that people remember the most about this movie. Then we cut to Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum from the first one, where now he is at a train station and he's on a train ride to John Hammond's house to basically interview him over something important. He meets back up with Tim and Lex, the kids from the first movie, briefly. But then the kids walk out since Ian must have a meeting with John's workers and then, well, eventually John Hammond. And in this movie, John Hammond is a sick, bedridden man in this movie, and only in the movie, not for very long, but it's in the movie briefly. And so he's having a conversation with Ian Malcolm, and then Ian Malcolm says, okay, so you're telling me there's another island of dinosaurs, no fences this time, and you want to send people in. You want to send in very few people on the ground, right? And who are these 4 lunatics that you're trying to con into this? But then John Hammond says, well, it was difficult to convince them as to what they were going to see. And in the end, I had to use my checkbook to get them there. But there's Nick Van Owen, who is a video documentarian, and Eddie Carr, who's a field equipment expert. Oh, we have our paleontologist, and I was hoping perhaps you might be the 4th. Now, we've been on the verge of Chapter 11 ever since that accident at the park, and there are those who wanted to exploit Site B in order to bail us. They've been planning it out for 4 years, and I've been able to stop it until now. But a few weeks ago, a British family on a yacht cruise stumbled across the island and their girl was injured. Oh, no, she's fine. But the board has used the incident to take control of Engine from me. And now it is only a matter of time before this lost world is found and pillaged. Public opinion is the one thing that I can use to preserve it. But in order to rally that kind of support, I need a complete photo record of those animals alive and in their natural habitat. Ian Malcolm then says, so you went from capitalist to a naturalist in just 4 years. Well, that's something. But then after that, John Hammond says to him, it is our last chance at redemption. And then not long after that, Ian Malcolm, he goes to the island that Nick Van Owen, the character played by Vince Vaughn, is on. And we are introduced to Ian Malcolm's daughter, Kelly, who is basically a gymnastics fired from the team. And you know, she's not exactly happy at her dad right now for making promises he can't keep. And I like the part where he says to his daughter, hey, if you want good parental advice, don't listen to my advice. I thought that scene was kind of funny. But then, you know, but yeah, another thing I really like about this movie, I really like the story to this movie, how Ian Malcolm is more so the main character this time around, and he teams up with researchers to go to the island. You know, I thought that was a rather cool idea for a sequel. And I like the scene where Ian Malcolm and Nick Van Owen come across the Stegosaurus, and we're introduced to Dr. Sarah Harding, played by Julianne Moore. And I like the part where Nick is about to take a picture, and then Sarah comes out and scares him. I thought that scene was funny. Then the main characters arrive at Eddie's camper, and we meet up with Ian Malcolm's daughter, Kelly. And I like the part when the group of mercenaries arrive on the island. I mean, there's a scene where you have a guy riding a motorcycle in the middle of a dinosaur stampede. I thought that scene was pretty cool. Then you have the whole scene where a guy is riding a and then you got the whole scene where we are introduced to Dieter Stark, who is played by Peter Stormare, who I've always really liked as an actor, whether it's in this movie, Armageddon, Constantine, Bad Boys 2, Wind Talkers, 8mm, 22 Jump Street, John Wick 2, etc. I've always really liked him as an actor. It's nighttime, and Sarah and Nick are sneaking into the darkness and releasing the dinosaurs from the cages. And I really like the scene where, the Triceratops is set free, and it rams into a tent stand where the mercenaries are broadcasting news on, and it like kind of scares them out of nowhere. I really like that scene. But then Nick decides to grab an injured baby T-Rex, because the T-Rex has a broken leg, and, they plan on bringing it back to Eddie's camper. That way they can treat its leg and stuff like that. Well, that's the idea Nick has. Let's just say that Sarah is not so keen on that idea, and she is like, are you crazy and stuff like this? But he eventually talks her into it, and then they go to the camper, and this right here leads to the what is arguably the best scene of the movie, where two T-Rexes, aka the baby's parents, arrive, and the parents want their baby back, infant back, rightfully so. And I like the part when Ian Malcolm decides to come to the rescue, and he's in the camper, and then like one of the T-Rexes like flips a car off a cliff, and then Ian Malcolm says, "Mama is very angry." Sarah then decides to do the right thing, and she gives the baby back to the two T-Rexes. I really like the scene, where the two T-Rexes, they're trying to push the camper over the cliff, but Eddie comes to the rescue. He ties a metal rope and hooks it to the camper, he basically hooks a metal rope to the camper with two hooks, and he's basically trying to pull the camper up with the truck, but, it's not working so well because it's wet and slippery outside and it's raining, and he's trying to pull it up, but eventually two of the T-Rexes manage to get him. But before that happens, Sarah is on top of the back door window, the huge back door window of the camper, mind you, and it's about to crack, but, basically a gun that Eddie has falls, the glass breaks, but Ian is able to save Sarah. And then the guy, Eddie, like I said, he has metal hooks attached to the trailer with a metal rope, and he's trying to pull the trailer up, but, it's not working because it's wet and slippery, and then the two T-Rexes come in and basically tear the guy in half. But Nick, Ian, Sarah, eventually, of course, they manage to survive and stuff like that and climb up to safety. Oh, and another thing, his daughter, Ian Malcolm's daughter, Kelly, was in a tree stand where it was safer. But anyways, getting back to the review. Then there's the scene where Dieter Stark, played by Peter Stormare, is attacked by the small compy dinosaurs, where he goes behind a log. We don't see it on screen, but he's basically mauled to death by these small compies, and we see some blood, dripping into like the small water below, which, again, for a PG-13 movie is a rather dark scene, I will admit. Then Roland, the mercenary leader, then demands everyone to move along, and that break is over. One of my favorite scenes of the movie is when Ian Malcolm's daughter Kelly and then, Sarah are sleeping in a tent, but they are woken up, and they are staying as still as possible as a T-Rex is just sticking its head inside of the tent. And then, Roland and everyone else is running away from a T-Rex and, basically getting to safety. And the main characters, they basically run underneath a cave that a waterfall is basically, that's an entrance that's being hidden by a waterfall. The main characters run in there and try to hide from the T-Rex, but the T-Rex basically licks Sarah with its tongue. And then, basically what happens is, there's a character named David who freaks out because a snake gets on his shoulders, and then everyone's telling him to stay still, but then he runs out, and then the T-Rex basically grabs him, and then blood drips down the waterfall behind the cave entrance that the rest of the main characters are hiding behind. Then, of course, there's the whole scene where the velociraptors attack some people in the tall grass, which, again, is a part that I'm sure a lot of people remember from this movie. Ian Malcolm, his daughter Kelly, and Sarah run inside the building. Kelly saves her dad, Ian, from a velociraptor kicking it in the face with gymnastics, which I will admit that is a downside to the movie. That is kind of a dumb scene. And then and I like the part then when Ian Malcolm says, he's like, oh, wow, they really cut you from the gymnastics? Well, he's like, really? They cut you from the gymnastics team? But then Ian, Sarah, and Kelly, they go to Nick in the helicopter to escape the island. But then, you know, Roland and his crew captured a T-Rex as well as the infant. Sarah and Ian arrive in New York to basically tell the mercenaries that what they are doing is a bad idea, that it's not going to work. But, you know, the mercenaries will not let them in the place. But then, you know, I like the scene close to the end of the movie. Well, hold on. I like the scene in the movie where there is a giant, huge ship that crashes into a really large dock, and then all the characters run out the way. But then Ian Malcolm eventually gets on top of the boat, and, you know, and the mercenaries are trying to work around it. But then Ian Malcolm says, no, do not push that button. But then, you know, it's too late, and then the T-Rex is accidentally let loose from, like, a giant cage it was in and stuff like that. And then, of course, there's the iconic scene in the movie where the T-Rex basically rampages in San Diego City. I mean, that was definitely the highlight of the movie, and you know, and that's definitely the scene that I'm sure most people remember from this movie. And I like how at the end of the movie, and another thing, when it comes to the T-Rex stampede, I would say my favorite part of the movie is the part where the T-Rex is basically rampaging through San Diego City and, like, it knocks a bus over, of all things. Like, I really like that scene. But then eventually, you know, the solutions are solved. And then I like how at the end of the movie, John Hammond is on the national news TV and he says these words: "It is absolutely imperative that we work with the Costa Rican Department of Biological Preserves to establish a set of rules for the preservation and isolation of that island. These creatures require our absence to survive, not our help. And if we could only step aside and trust in nature, life will find a way." And then the movie ends with a pterodactyl on a branch. So yeah, okay. Do I have any flaws with the movie? Yeah. The pacing is good for the most part, but a little slow in some scenes. And then, like I mentioned, the whole scene where Kelly kicks a raptor in the face is kind of dumb. But other than that, The Lost World Jurassic Park is a great sequel. And I do recommend this movie if you did enjoy the first movie. And I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. So yeah, guys, that was my review of The Lost World Jurassic Park. And next up, I will be reviewing Jaws for its 50th anniversary. And then we'll get back to the Jurassic Park reviews. But we'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.